Mariah, thank you so much for joining me today. Would you like to start off by talking a bit about yourself and where you were in your career when kids entered the scene?
Yes, I had kids in my early 30s. So, sort of mid career. I was working at PayPal and eBay at the time, and I had two boys about 2.5 years apart. But the crazy thing I always tell people is that I decided to leave my job at eBay to found my first startup when my youngest was 9 months old. And so he had just started sleeping through the night and stopped being breastfed. And so not only is he 9 months old, my husband takes a job working remotely in another state 5 days a week. And I think to myself, this is the perfect time to start a startup. So they were quite little when I was doing my first startup.
Oh my goodness. So, what have you learned from juggling all that? From juggling your important roles as mom and a corporate executive, and what's your best advice for other working moms?
Yeah, I actually talk about this a lot with working moms. And, this one's a little bit about my personality. And so it's not true for everyone, but I have seen it in a lot of others. And I call it my policy of dropping perfection. And, what do I mean by that? A huge part of my success, going from a small town in Texas to Stanford to early career was just about being perfect, being on top of every in my 20s, I answered every email. I knew every detail my boss asked. I dropped no ball. I knew everything. I was perfect. And but then when I realized, first as a mom, and frankly later as a CEO, that it's way better to practice like intentional dropping of perfection and choose what matters. And my husband and I sat down when the kids were quite little and we made a list of like what matters to us. And we both actually love working. So our jobs mattered a great deal to us and our family mattered. And, my extra was I like to exercise, his was friends. So we did this analysis and we actually said, like, what just doesn't matter to us? And we dropped a ton of stuff. And so our house is far from perfect. I was never the mom with the cute treats at the birthday party. Some examples were like, my husband's car just stopped working in San Francisco one night because like he hadn't maintained it in 18 months. Or, I got like sent to collections for some doctor's bill I didn't pay because we don't open our postal mail. I mean, we did automate that eventually. But I guess my point is like, those are both maybe annoying and, borderline embarrassing, but it didn't matter. The big picture was right. Like we did work, we had careers we loved and still do. We were there for kid pickup, we were there for kid events, and like, yeah, like the rest of it just like doesn't matter. And like I just like nobody remembers the minutia of running like a perfect household. And so we just like, "Rah." And then, I would say the same is true at work. Like I again, as I said, I used to think my job was to answer everything, be on top of everything. And I've really hard pivoted to like know my most important. Like I keep a post-it note on my monitor of like, these are the top three. And I just make sure I'm getting to them. And like, I don't chase every email, like answer right away, follow up on everything. And, it's also had an effect of actually helping my team in releasing the need to be first, to be perfect, to have every detail. They get to have more space. And I guess, not everyone has been focused on this, but I do see this a lot in some people, which is like, if you can release that that's your value, it both actually helps you be more balanced and have more room for your family. Frankly, also makes you a better executive because you leave room for other people.
So, how do you make yourself feel comfortable with the inevitable trade-offs that are inherent in juggling commitments, both
Yeah,
at work and at home?
one of my favorites is I remember picking up my eldest son when he was like at pre-K. I picked him up at 6 when pre-K was done, and he's like, "Mommy, how come you don't come at 3 like the other mommies?" I'm like, it's a good question, Xander. Well, mommy works, and mommy works because she likes to work and she's good at work. And and like over the years, I mean, in those years, I did like sweat getting out early so I could drive them home every day because I'm like, I want them to remember. And I asked them later, I'm like, do you remember when mommy picked you up and drove you home from school every day? They're like, no, not really. No, older and they sit at the dining table where we debate like, business models and how to give feedback to an employee. And, I think they've grown to realize like, well, mommy's pretty good at her job and we're proud of mommy. And I had a really fun moment where my middle schooler, like he goes to some class and the teacher is like, they're like, if there aren't enough of these, what should you do? And the teacher's answer that he wanted was to protest. And my son's answer is, well, obviously, like you should assess the market and then go like get those manufactured and build a business to sell them because it's a gap in the market, because it was like, and the teacher was like, I'm like, oh, great answer. And so, I actually think the kids, I am actually, and maybe this sounds weird, I'm actually pretty comfortable with the trade-off. Like I actually feel like we model for the kids a set of behavior that and priorities. And we always made the time, like we make the time for them. Like I don't join PTA, God bless the other people who do. But like I showed up to help in kindergarten because it was near my kid. So we are choosing to spend time with our kids. Maybe we're just not choosing some of the other stuff. Yeah. And I do really thank those other moms who did that.
So when you think back on the moms you've managed, who are among your most valuable employees, what did they do differently that made them so successful?
Yeah, and I've managed a lot of moms over the years, but one of my startups was about giving parents like advice and products for their kids. And, as you might imagine, we had a lot of working parents. We were all about baby and early parenting, both moms and dads as employees. And, I think the most important advice I would give them is like, life is a pie chart. You have work, you have family, you have your hobbies, you have exercise, whatever it is for you.
Mhm.
And to be quite intentional about the time you give and how you allocate. And it's not that it can be perfect day to day, but when you think about it in terms of weeks or months, you do need to make sure it's balanced and it's sort of, you got to course correct it when it isn't. And, I often tell people like, and I do this in all my career coaching about this topic and others, that in the end, you have to be responsible for choosing those decisions. And so just being intentional about what you need and taking it upon yourself to make sure it's true.
If you could wave a magic wand, what policies or changes to the workplace would you make that would make a difference for working moms?
Well, I sort of think about this in context of like workplaces have to support people in many stages of what they're doing for many reasons. And, I just, I do think we just went through the greatest social workplace experiment in years, like the 2 years of sort of the COVID, work from home, remote. Like, I don't know that the industry would have ever tried this. Like, I would have been like, what do you mean work from home? We can have one day work from home. Everyone needs to be in the office. And like, I probably thought that for years. I'm like, well, that's how collaboration happens. And like this kind of like enforced 2-year grand experiment, I think has changed my mind and most people's. Like it's like the biggest experiment in like how workplaces operate in like, I don't know how long. And I think what's emerged at a lot of places is like much more willingness that there's in office collaboration, there's work from home, there's remote, there's teams in different places. And this notion that we can find a way to be effective and collaborative in ways that we didn't actually imagine is a pretty powerful thing to help all of us like have like defined a structure that makes sense to be both exceptionally productive at work and also to have like the time and space for just a little less stress and just a smidgen more time with our families. I mean, I think, lack of commuting every day is like material for a lot of people. So I just think, and what is worth, like, I don't know that anyone would have been like, let's just try it. I think it sort of took a huge event to make us all try it.
Absolutely. Well, you've been so helpful and really insightful. Really appreciate your sharing your experience with me today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.